Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, this is Orphanlast, aka Skylar Madison, and today's animation isn't really anything special or anything that I'd consider to be finished, but that's not the point of this video. This video is aimed to help the newcomers into Opentoonz, and it's been a while since I fully addressed that portion of the audience. They have tons of questions, and usually the same ones over and over again, and when that happens, it's best to tackle those questions. That said, I do something in this video that my more experienced audience might want to see. It simplifies a few things that you've seen me do over and over and over again. My workflow inside of Opentoonz has changed dramatically from when the program first launched, and the primary reason for it changing is because prior to version 1.1.3, any type of a raster level would crash Opentoonz instantly. So while I was providing the tutorials for the beginners that are inside of my Opentoonz playlist, I was drawing everything out with nothing but vectors, and I'm sure that has served as a deterrent for a lot of newcomers using Opentoonz. And if you're a newcomer to Opentoonz and you're watching my playlist, you will be watching those videos. Not all of these features in this video existed when I made the playlist, so learn what you can from this video and learn what you can from the rest of the playlist. Working with vectors needs to be improved inside of Opentoonz, even still today. This isn't Adobe Flash or Adobe Animate CC, but that doesn't mean that the vectors are bad inside of Opentoonz in any way. It's just that you need to have the right workflow in order to optimize the results with the vectors. It took me a while to figure out what the optimum workflow in Opentoonz is, at least for me. Most of my viewers probably know most of the material in this video, but since my channel is primarily focused on delivering a finished product, my workflow is split up into 3 to 6 videos most of the time. I've never actually had a video that just boils down those 3 to 6 videos into one simple, easy to understand video. I keep getting questions about the workflow, people complaining about the brush tool. And really, if you're using the brush tool on a vector level, yeah, you're probably going to get irritated and you're probably going to complain. I do not suggest that you do your rough animations with vector levels in Opentoonz. Now, if you're new to Opentoonz and you're watching this video, I suggest you do a few things before watching the rest of this video. Watch all of my OTX videos, and I have another 2 videos that you should be watching as well. Opentoonz 1.1.3 is here. That's a video you should watch. And Opentoonz 1.2.0 is here. That's another video that you should watch. This way you can see the newest things that have been added into Opentoonz that are not included in the playlist. Those videos aren't tutorials. They're news videos, so they're not included in the Opentoonz playlist. So why don't you just cover all of that information in this video? Because I've already covered that material, and those videos are easy to find on my channel. They're some of the most commonly watched videos on my channel. But eventually I'll be making a bounty that'll change the interface to Opentoonz a little bit. It'll be dramatically changing the way Opentoonz looks, and it'll kind of change a little bit of how you interact with Opentoonz. So as soon as that bounty is posted, funded, developed, and then released into a stable version in Opentoonz, I'll be starting from scratch with the basic tutorials. The playlist will evolve to be way more up-to-date and everything like that. Opentoonz develops very quickly. But for me to try to cover everything in this video would take a long time and kind of miss the point of what this video is about. I'll try to cover some of the information that's in those videos I just suggested, but even this video will probably need to be remade at some point after that bounty is released in a stable version. So let's go ahead and get into this. When you first see Opentoonz, you'll see something like this. It's called the X sheet. I don't really use the X sheet anymore, but through the playlist, I used to use this all the time because there was nothing else to use. If you click on this button right here that says X sheet, it'll turn the X sheet into a horizontal timeline. Although the X sheet and the timeline both have the same functionality, most people are familiar with a timeline inside of their animation software. So let's go ahead and snap the timeline into place. Now, if you move your mouse where it says column on the horizontal timeline, and then you right click, you'll see a drop down menu appear. Go ahead and click on Toggle X Sheet Toolbar. Once you click on that, you'll have this new menu, and it's really nice. It makes a lot of little shortcuts to simple operations in Opentoonz that actually used to be really overly complicated. First thing that I do is I create a raster level. It's located right here on the X Sheet toolbar. Personally, I use the raster levels as a means to make the rough animation. So I call the file Football Rough. Now, in this video, the goal isn't to make a masterpiece. I'm just drawing out a football, doing a little bit of movement. Now, if you go to the Studio palette and double click on a style, which is something that's kind of like a swatch, you'll get the style editor popping up on the screen, which is primarily used to change the color of your styles. But if you click on the raster tab at the top of this little pop-up window here, you'll see all the brushes that are available for raster levels. But keep in mind that this specific list of brushes will not work on vector levels or Toonz raster levels. There is a difference from a raster level to a Toonz raster level. Yes, the word raster is used in both of them, but they both operate very, very differently. So I select a brush that looks like a pencil because a raster level is like the rough animation process with pencil and paper, traditional animation. So I really like using some type of pencil-looking brush. So at this point, I start animating. Now, this isn't a how to animate in Opentoonz video. It's a what's the best workflow, start to finish type of video for Opentoonz. Okay, so I have some sort of animation going on here. If I focus on quality in this video, I'd wind up splitting this video into maybe 3 videos or more, just like all of my other videos. I'm trying to make a whole workflow fit into one video here. I double-click on the column that I've been working on, and I name it Rough, spelt R-U-F-F. Why? Because animators spell rough animation wrong. That's why. Why do they do that? Well, because they do. That's why. It's just what they do. I'm not joking. So the next step is to do the cleanup work. And we do that with a vector level. And we can create one right here. I named the file Football Cleanup. So I start cleaning up with the geometry tool. And it has the polyline, which is really useful because it works kind of like the pen tool inside of Photoshop minus one particular feature, such as you have to manipulate both of the handles. So it's expected that you'll have to refine the line that you've drawn with the polyline with the control point editor. I wind up doing that about 50% of the time. Now there's 2 ways that you can finish a line with the geometry tool's polyline function. One way is you can click on the circle that represents the beginning of your stroke. And the other way is just by drawing it out with the polyline and then pressing enter. So here you see me adjusting the line with the control point editor, and you see that the line wound up having a very uniform thickness. That can get pretty boring, so let's go ahead and pull out the pump tool. Now, I've created my own shortcut for this particular tool. I specifically set it to being Alt-P. But you can create your own keyboard shortcut to being whatever you want it to be. So I keep using these 3 tools, the geometry tool's polyline, the control point editor, and the pump tool in order to clean up this entire animation. Sometimes I use the cut tool as well, but I'm not going to go super in-depth with that. It's pretty self-explanatory how to use that tool. Now it's time to create the shadows and highlights. Go to the Studio palette, right-click on a style, and select New Style from the drop-down list. Turn the color to blue for our shadows. You do that by double-clicking on that new style and just adjusting the color on this style editor. And from there, I go ahead and use the polyline on all of the frames in order to make the shadows. And I used a blue color to represent the shadows. Now, of course, I could draw all of these shadows and highlight lines on my rough animation as well. In fact, I probably should have. But I'm working as fast as I can to get through this video, just so that I don't overthink the video and don't overthink the workflow. While you're making your shadows and highlights, make sure that there are no gaps in your shadows and highlights. And what that means is basically, think about using the fill tool. Do you want there to be a gap? Do you want it to exceed past this specific region or not? If you don't want it to exceed past a specific region, make sure you move the line with the control point editor so that it meets up with the border of the object that you're drawing so that it won't fill into other areas. Do not attempt to color your animation with the vector level, even though you can do that. If you do that, you'll be hating life. In fact, throughout most of my early work inside of the playlist, you see me trying to color my animation with vectors, and it's a nightmare. The only time that I'd actually be coloring my vector work directly is if I was making a cutout animation rig. That's it. Next, I create a red style and I make my highlights. So now I'm going to clone this vector cleanup work, and I'm going to clone it into a Toonz raster level. Now, I've used a convoluted way of doing this in the past. In fact, in my last animation tutorial, I did an overcomplicated process in order to do this. And even my experienced audience may learn a thing or two from this video, specifically from right here. I select all of the frames on this yellow vector level, and I go to Level, Vector to Toonz Raster. And what it does is it creates a new column on the timeline that has the same artwork on it as my vector level. Here, I go ahead and deactivate my vector level, and I zoom in a bit so that you can see the pixelization to prove it. Doing it this way makes it so that you have all of your levels duplicated onto another column in a different level type, and it preserves your timing perfectly, all in one step. This is a faster workflow than what I've used in the past, even fairly recently. So I move this new color column underneath the vector line work, and I create a new style with it and start coloring the basic coloring, specifically a brown color. Once that's accomplished, I create a new style, and I use the RGB color picker and use it on the brown color, and then I darken the brown color a bit. Then I use that color with the fill tool in order to fill in the shadows throughout the whole course of the animation. I also go to my cleanup column, and I change the blue style to the shadow color by using the RGB picker tool and just selecting the darker brown color. This makes it so that if you keep your vector lines for your shadows and highlights, no one will ever know that your fills are done with a type of raster level. But here's an issue here. Notice that the shadow line is over the other line work. We don't want that. So I use the selection tool. I select the shadow line, the blue shadow line, and then press Control left bracket. This will send it back in the stacking order, all the way back. So I do that for the full duration of the animation. I select all of the shadow lines and send them all the way to the back of the stacking order. So now it's time to color the highlights. I go ahead and just color everything red, and once I'm done with that, I use the RGB picker tool on the brown mid-tone color, and I use the style editor to lighten the color up. Now this is where you can see how a style is different from a swatch. Once you change the color to a style, it changes the color for everything used with that style throughout the full course of the animation. And once again, I select the cleanup level, I select the red style, and I use the RGB picker on the highlight color. I also move the highlight line to the back of the stacking order on each and every frame of the animation. Once again, you do that by pressing Control left bracket. I then color the weird shoelace things on the football. Forgive me if I'm using the wrong term, because I don't give a crap about football. It's possibly the most boring thing I could ever think about, wasting my time doing. The best part of an NFL party is eating an entire bag of Doritos. So I colored those with a vibrant blue color. Once the blue color is applied, I pull out my style editor and desaturate the color to a really light blue. Now, I really don't like these black lines, so I select the black style on my cleanup column, and select the shadow color, and select the shadow color itself with the RGB picker tool. Then I double click on the style that used to be completely black, and then darken it up quite a bit, from just being identical from the shadow color to being just a little bit darker. But now I'm not really happy with the shoelace thingies. The outline around them is a dark brown color. I don't like that. So I go ahead and make a new blue style, and I select the lines, and then click on this new blue style, and that changes the color to the lines on the viewer. But I'm not happy with that color now that I've applied it to every single one of my frames. So I double click on this blue style, click on the basic coloring of the shoelace things with the RGB picker tool, and then slightly darken the style. Now, I'm sure that you noticed that the fill tool didn't quite successfully fill everything in perfectly with the Toonz raster color column. That's fine. Just use the paintbrush tool. It's the icon on the tools panel that looks like a wide bristled brush. This basically just applies nothing but fills, but only works exclusively on Toonz raster levels. Go ahead and manually go through each of the frames and police each of these little tiny gaps. Okay, so that's a super rough overview of the workflow that I recommend for Opentoonz. This has been the easiest way that I could possibly think of in order to teach you guys how to animate in Opentoonz without spending hours and hours and hours explaining each and every little thing. So for those of you that are just beginning with Opentoonz, I'm going to be placing this video in the playlist right before the video series that's talking about how to work the X sheet. So just watch that. Just keep in mind that the horizontal timeline works exactly like the X sheet. They are exactly the same thing. It's just oriented differently. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like it, please like, share, and subscribe anyways. There is a lot of work that goes into these videos. A ridiculous amount of work. The same amount of work that it would take for a full-time job for my free time. So anyways, so if you guys would like to take a look at any of the other videos that I've created, feel free to click on any of the videos that are appearing on the screen right now, and have a great day.